Hey everybody, welcome to Everyday Fi. I'm your host Megan Combs, and I'm here to say that you do not need $1 million book deal or a famous blog to reach financial independence. By exploring the lives of everyday people pursuing Fi, I'll show you how to forge your own path to financial freedom the everyday way. In today's episode, we delve into Sam's multifaceted career journey, from engineer to stay-at-home dad, and finally, pilot for a major airline. Sam candidly shares his challenges with financial dependence during his marriage, how a painful divorce led to his financial awakening, and his transition into the world of aviation. Sam also enlightens us about the cost differences and timelines between pursuing a medical degree and becoming a pilot. By sharing his story, Sam illuminates the financial vulnerability and lack of preparedness that many face in adulthood. Despite life's unexpected turns, however, Sam shows us that financial independence is achievable with the right mindset and perseverance. Tune in to hear part 1 of Sam's story. And also, just a quick note, I don't seem to know how to select the correct microphone for my episodes, so I'm sorry about the sound on my side for this. It looks like my sound was coming through my AirPods again. Thanks for your patience, y'all. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Thanks for listening. I am here with Sam, my new buddy, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. Sam, how are you doing? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm Sam. Just had a birthday. I'm 36 now. I am a pilot for a major airline. Before that, I was a stay-at-home dad for a short while. Before that, I was an engineer. I think I may have Googled or put in the podcast finder like financial independence, and I'll do this like every 6 months or so to see if there's like any new podcasts coming up. And I found your show and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And so I started listening and I thought, this is really cool because a lot of the finance shows that I hear are could be like book promotions or it's like an echo chamber a little bit of the same people. And I really do enjoy that too, but this just seems like a cool, fresh approach to talking about five. It just normal people, if you can call people in the financial independence community normal. So I just thought that was really cool. And I've always been super interested in finance now for it's probably been 6 or 7, 8 years. Before that, I had no clue about finances at all. Money just kind of came in, and I was just never a big spender. And then as a kid, like I never had to think about it. And I'm sure we'll get into my background here in a little while. But once I had my financial awakening, it was just like, wow, I'm going full force into this, and it's never stopped. And I don't know if it will ever stop. So I'm just kind of along for the ride and really enjoying it and enjoy chatting with others about it. And so I reached out to talk to you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow, there's so much there. You did it in like less than 2 minutes, and yet there's so much there. So that's awesome. Uh, First, thank you for listening to my show. I can't believe that you found it that way. I guess there's some sort of SEO I don't know is working for me, but cool that I didn't put into place. That's awesome. So, okay, I want to go back to the part where you said you were a stay-at-home dad and you were engineer, stay-at-home dad, pilot. So, tell me a little bit more about that story. Like, I'd love to know, why did you become an engineer? Why did you become a stay-at-home dad? Why did you become a pilot? Just what's that story like?
Yeah, I became an engineer. Originally, when I went to college, it was for music. I was a really big music buff. I was in marching band as a kid, and my brother played trumpet. And when I was in fifth grade, his band director came to our class, and he knew me through him. And so he was like, "Hey, you gonna play the trumpet?" And I was like, "I want to be just like Big Bro. Of course, I'm gonna play trumpet." So I got into music that way. And then when it came time to graduate high school, I didn't put any thought at all into where I was going to go or what I was going to study. And my girlfriend at the time, who was a year younger, had mentioned like, "Hey, I'm going to go to this school." And so I was like, "Hey, okay, I guess I'll apply to this school too." And so I did, and I was relatively talented at the musical instrument that I played, which ended up being euphonium instead of trumpet. But I got a really nice scholarship to go to school, and so it just seemed to make sense. I didn't have anything else on my mind. I went there, and it took a year and a half. And all of a sudden, it was like, well, is this really the path I want to take? What kind of career is this going to lead me down? How am I going to support myself? And then my horn was stolen my sophomore year. And I was like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity to switch. And so, did I meticulously start like searching my soul to figure out what's going to make me happy? No. I went back to the girlfriend and said, hey, what are you doing? She was like, oh, I think I'm going to be an engineer. And I'm like, okay, cool, me too. And so I applied to the School of Engineering. So that's how I got into the engineering thing. And that was actually really nice. And I thoroughly enjoyed school. But when it came time to get a real job in the real world, it was just not for me. I'm just not built for cubicle life. I was pretty miserable and I kind of hopped around from job to job. And at one point, I just thought, okay, I can't do this the rest of my life. It's just not going to work. And so, in the background of all of this happening, I had met who ended up becoming my wife and then ex wife. She joined the military during her second year of medical school. And after she graduated, we ended up spending a year in Ohio where our daughter was born. And then we moved to Japan. That was like an easy switch from doing jobs that I had been doing before to stay at home dad because, okay, now we're in this totally new country. It's going to take me a while to even find a job or a part time job or whatever. So I did that. Also, in the background of all that, I started flying lessons. So when my ex was in medical school, the third and fourth year, she had to do rotations. And so she would spend like a month at this hospital doing this type of medicine, and then a month here and a month there. We had two huskies with us. So it just made no sense for me to be with her living in a hotel room while she went to work with two dogs. So I stayed at my parents'. I found a guy like 20 minutes from my parents' house who was still giving flight lessons. I called him up and asked if he would be willing to take me up. And he's like, hey, drive out here in 30 minutes and we'll go up. And so that's what I did. And so I was kind of working on that. So the plan was always to go to Japan, let her do her thing once we got back to the state, continue my training and become a pilot. So like that's kind of the really long-winded way of telling you about my transition from high school to how I got to be a pilot.
Yeah, you were very good at doing this very concisely. My goodness, we're only 6 minutes in, and I'm like, have you done this before? I'm curious what drew you to wanting to learn how to fly and what drew you to wanting to become a pilot?
My best friends, two out of the three of them, had aviation interests. So when I was a junior in high school, my parents sponsored a German foreign exchange student to come over at my behest. I was, for whatever reason, just really wanted to have that experience. And it turns out that once he went back and finished his school and his obligatory military training, he came back to the United States and became a helicopter pilot. And I was like, okay, that's cool. My other buddy got through college and was kind of finding his way and ended up applying to the Navy to be a pilot and got accepted. And so he started flying airplanes. And I'm like, huh, okay. If two of the three of my best friends are into aviation, there's like a pretty decent chance that I might be too. On top of that, the other consideration was to go to medical school. So both my parents are in the medical field. Neither of them are doctors, but I've just been around that. Plus, at some point, I was married to a physician, and I thought, okay, this might be something that I would be interested in. Both of those avenues, the ultimate goal was that I wanted a high-paying job. Just I don't know, part of it. And so I was trying to decide between those two. And I did do some medical work. I was a scribe, which I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a person who follows around a physician, usually in the emergency room, and they kind of hang out in the back of the room with a computer and do all the dictation and typing the patient history and lab work. And then as the encounter progresses, as the doctor orders stuff, we type that in and let them know when the labs are back and blah, 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 all the way to discharge. So I did a bit of that. I was also a nurse's aide for a while just to kind of see if being in the actual hospital doing work seemed appealing to me. And it did. But I just kind of so happened to get to flying first in a more real hands-on way than actually applying to medical school and going through the rigmarole of having to be even qualified to take the MCAT and all that. It was sort of just kind of happenstance. When I was in the air, I thought to myself, I can't even imagine that people get paid to do this. I'm just up here having fun. And I was like, yeah, I think I could probably do this. And so I just kind of kept with it and stuck with it. And then eventually I got hired and then I started flying professionally. And I kind of all of a sudden found myself, I'm like, this is a career. I'm getting a big boy job now. People are paying me to fly them around. This is really, really cool. And I've just gotten lucky with the hiring environment that I found myself in 2020, 2021, 2022, like post COVID, it just boomed. And so I went from flying a little 172 Cessna four-seater plane to flying a 200-person passenger jet really, really quickly. So I don't even know if I would have stuck through it had it not been for like the insane stroke of luck that I had just the time that I entered in the industry. I don't know, I may have gone some other way, but I can definitely say that I thoroughly enjoy flying. And if I could fly as often as I would like to and not as much as I feel like I should right now, I could definitely see it being a career for the long haul and not even necessarily like just a job until I retire early. So I feel pretty fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, there's so many questions I want to ask. Okay. It sounds like you're a commercial pilot. Is that the right term? Like you fly people to Europe or Dallas or whatever. Okay, got it. And I guess this might be a strange question, but did you ever consider combining the pilot and the healthcare fields together? Because I know there's search and rescue pilots, and maybe they're only pilots and they're not medical either, but I'm wondering if there was anything in there that you ever explored, because I know somebody who's in search and rescue, and so I'm curious if that's even an option.
I think it is, although that's a pretty niche job to have. I did talk to a helicopter pilot here. I was at my parents' house, and they're not search and rescue, but it's a medical, I don't know what you call it. Like if somebody needs serious medical attention and they can't get them to like Vanderbilt Hospital in enough time, they're going to send the helicopter. That helicopter has to have a pilot or multiple pilots. And at the small local airport, that's where that helicopter is stationed. When I would go down there, occasionally there would be the pilots there and I got to talk to them. So that could have been an inroad potentially. Becoming a helicopter pilot is extremely expensive. As much as it cost me to just fly fixed wing, helicopters dramatically more expensive. So that would have been a little bit harder, but maybe possible. The military could have been another route. My ex was also interested in aviation somewhat, although that may have been because I had an interest in it. But she was a flight surgeon when we lived in Japan. And before she went over, she had the opportunity to get like 10 or 15 flight hours in a Cirrus plane, which is like a little faster, small plane. And so she was thinking about and entertaining the idea of finding a job that allowed her to be both a physician and a pilot. And those do exist in the military. But aside from those two jobs, I don't know if there would have been a good way to mix the two of them otherwise. And I think because of the swiftness of the trajectory that I got on, I just kind of kept rolling with what life was giving me because it was giving me what I wanted and it worked out really well. I mean, who knows what the future holds, right? I'm still fairly young. I could go do lots of other different things. But for now, I feel like I'm in a good spot.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I was curious because I'm thinking about the listeners and they're like, you've got two passions. What if you do both? Why not both? Like the little girl in the taco. Anyway, the taco commercial, if anybody knows what I'm talking about, it's fine. So I guess, can you give us a little bit on like how long it would have taken you to do a medical degree? I think we understand that it takes quite a long time versus getting your pilot's license and getting a career there. And you did mention cost. Is there a very big difference in cost? If somebody wants to be a helicopter pilot, it sounds like it's expensive too, but is it as expensive as being a doctor? So curious about that.
I feel like I have decent insight because I lived as a spouse of somebody who kind of went through this. And I would have taken probably at least a year worth of classes to be eligible to sit for the MCAT. And then the process of applying to medical school and getting in. So I would probably estimate that would have taken 2 years. And then med school was 4 years. So now you're looking at sixth. And then you're looking at a residency, which could have been anywhere from 3 to 5 years, and then a potential fellowship after that. So for insight, my spouse is 9 months older than me, so she's also 36. She is still not out as a complete attending yet. She's in her second year of fellowship, and she graduated medical school in 2016, so that was 9 years ago. It can be an extremely long haul to get to the end of that road. Cost wise, at least when we got out, when she graduated, and that also ties into the whole financial picture. We were roughly 225,000 in debt for the medical school. It cost me about 80,000 to get all my licenses and ratings enough to get hired. That can be pretty variable depending on a lot of different factors. I would say on average, I did it probably cheaper than most other pilots can. It probably cost closer to 100,000. I would say a helicopter pilot, you're looking at 150 to 170,000 roughly. I don't have much information in that world, so I'm just kind of guessing. And my buddy told me when he went through his training, although that's been over a decade from now, so who knows what costs look like. So all of it's expensive. As far as the timeline to become a pilot, definitely shorter than medical school. I was singularly focused on getting my ratings and getting hired because at the time I was just freshly divorced when I started flying, at least in earnest. So I did my first flight in 2015, and over the course of the next 4 years, I probably only ended up getting 150 flight hours, which is not much at all. But once I got back to the States after we were in Japan and then we divorced, and I came back here, that was at the end of 2018, I believe. And then I started a flight program that I got into with a small regional airline, which ended up hiring me. And I started my first flight in like January of 2019, and I got hired by the airline in February of 2020. So it took me 13 months or so to go from where I was at to being paid. So I'm willing to guess that if I had gone the other route to become a physician, I would still be many, many years from breaking even from a financial perspective. And I'd be surprised if I was even making an attending income. Like, that's not even a guarantee necessarily. Like I said, super fortunate to be where I'm at. I feel like I definitely took the right path, but still leaving it open for the future where I could potentially just like bankroll medical school if I wanted to instead of taking out loans. This may have even been like a better path towards my interest in medicine.
That's a great way to look at it. Hey, this might fund my next dream in my life because it pays so much. So that's really cool. How close are you to breaking even with your piloting? You don't have to tell me how much you make, but how close are you to breaking even?
I am open to any and all questions, and I try to be as specific as possible. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I don't know if I've thought about it enough, but I feel that when I listen to other people talk, I'm like, can you share us the numbers, please? Because I don't know if I can really get a firm grasp of what I'm thinking about. So, anyways, I paid off my loans long ago. That was my very first thing once I started flying. A little information about the loans. It's incredibly difficult, if not impossible. It was impossible for me to get a loan specifically for flight school because it was not related to a 4-year degree. And the pilot program that I got started with did not help with loans. They didn't offer any sort of financing either. So it's just you either have the money to do this program or you don't. And that's pretty much it. I was once again in the very fortunate position that my parents decided to take out a home equity line of credit out on their house. And that's how I got the money to start this program to fund all the flight hours in the beginning. I felt a lot of pressure and obligation to pay them back as soon as possible. And so I finished paying off. I became debt free last year in February 2024 was when I finished paying off all of the loans. My dad was incredibly generous, and he knew about how interested in finance that I was from the beginning in 2019. I wrote in the application that that's when I first started my spreadsheet, and I had all these ideas about all the tax advantage accounts. I'm just going to start shoving money in there, and it's going to be great. I told Dad, I'm willing to just pay you back and not focus on any of this stuff until the debt's gone. And he's absolutely not. You fill up all of your retirement accounts, all that, as much as you want to, and then we'll figure out how you're going to pay us back. No problem. I did that. So on top of paying back the loans, I was really picking up the wealth building process in the background. Where I'm at today is a very strong position given how long I've been doing this. My net worth is 615,000 or so. And this year I'm on track to make 325 total compensation. That is not without basically killing myself. I'm putting in the hours like crazy. I'm hoping not to do this for too long because I don't think it's sustainable, but it's just been so incredibly important to me to set myself up to where I never have to worry about the money again, because that was a big issue for me during the divorce. And it just put me in such a terrible headspace that I just felt like I have to be in control of this for the rest of my life. And this is way more important than these couple of years that I'm just going to like put my head down, work a whole bunch, make as much as I can, save and invest. And then one day I'll pick my head up, look around and be like, okay, this is what I want to do next.
Yeah. Are you willing to share a little bit about that and why you got a divorce, why you had some lack of control around it? Are you willing to go down that route?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
My ex decided to become a physician, and that entails a certain expected lifestyle. And she was really ready to step into that role. She was always a spender, and her mom was a spender. And at this point in time, I really looked at like how much we owed. Money just was just not even a thing to me. It was just, okay, I go to work and the money comes in and I'm not in tune with retirement accounts. What's our cash flow going out? How much debt we're in? All of that stuff was just not even on my brain yet. It didn't really hit me until we were in these situations where there's like a specific memory of we were in a grocery store paying for groceries, and my ex was in front of me and I was putting the stuff on the little conveyor belt and the cashier was swiping it. I can't remember how the conversation steered this way, but we were talking about either like putting something back or adding something to the pile. My ex turned to the cashier and she was like, I'm the one who makes the money. If I wanted him to get it. Wow, that's incredibly embarrassing that you just said this out in public. There were just these little instances where she wanted and at least in our dynamic, had the power in the relationship, which was obviously not a good thing. Then once we were in Japan, there was a time when she decided that she didn't want to be with me anymore and wanted to split up. So she changed all the passwords to all of our financial information. When I tried to log in to see what was going on, it was not the correct password. Do you want to reset the password? That's weird. Come to find out she had changed the passwords. The feeling of helplessness was just awful. I mean, on top of all the other stuff that was going on, unfortunately, there was infidelity. She had met somebody in Japan working on base who was a fellow physician. And it took me quite a while to find out what was going on. I was probably the typical spouse that's just kind of oblivious to what's going on. And like everybody else around is like, dude, you need to maybe look a little bit closer. I think some stuff's going on. I'm like, no, I trust him and it's fine. And all this other stuff. And obviously they were right and I was wrong. So I found out how a lot of people found out they had been texting and whatnot. And I found this list of messages and stuff. That was pretty hard. And I was hoping to try and figure things out, go to therapy and talk to her and see if we could figure things out. But she just wasn't having it. Unfortunately, as being the dependent in an international Air Force base, I just had very limited options. I went to talk to the lawyers and they were like, she wants you out. There's really nothing we can do. We're here to help the service member and protect them. And it's unfortunate that you don't really have any options. So I had to come back to the States. So that's kind of how that all happened.
Sounds really rough. I'm really sorry you went through that. I will say, I don't know your ex-wife, but I don't think it's fair, especially if you're friends, to say that you should have known. We marry our partners and we want to trust them, and I can't imagine them doing something like that. It's really on them for doing it. It's not on you, whether you knew or not. I don't agree with that. I think it makes sense that you might not have known because I don't think I would want to believe that about my husband. So I get it. And what did you do after that? So is she still in Japan? Is your daughter still there? Obviously, you moved back to the States. What happened then?
She still had a 2 year commitment after I left. So it was a 3 year commitment, and I was there for a year. So they had to stay for 2 more years. Talk about hard decisions. It's funny. If I ever feel like I'm in a pickle or I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this, like I think back to that time and I had to decide, do I force my hand and say, okay, you can do whatever you want with your life, but you're not going to have our daughter in this and I'm going to take her to the States with me? Or do I leave my daughter and because my ex-wife is not a bad mom. She's a great mom. I'm not going to talk bad about her in terms of that. I thought, okay, my plan is to go and I'm going to do this flight thing and I'm going to be gone a lot. And can I realistically say that I'm putting my daughter in a better situation doing this than just leaving her in the home that she's been in for a year? And so I made the decision to go to the States and leave her in Japan for 2 years. I traveled back and forth once every 3 months or so. I'd spend 2 weeks in Japan, which was kind of awkward. I would stay in the house on base and my ex would go live with her new person. While I was there, they would go on a vacation together. A really weird, awkward situation. I was still able to maintain a relationship with my daughter and create memories with her. So that was good. And then once that was over, they moved back to the States. And so they moved to Maryland, which is where I live now. So I commute to work. I live 3/4 of a mile from her. And so she'll come over and spend the night at my place and I'll walk her to school and stuff. And so I feel like the last 2 years I've gotten to really be a part of her childhood, at least as much as I can, considering how much I'm working. That's not been too bad. I also want to say, though, too, and this is not even a question that you asked, but just I feel compelled to say that obviously you're getting my side of the story of the whole relationship thing, but I was not the perfect husband either. And I'm sure it wasn't easy to deal with some of the stuff that I brought to the relationship too, with indecisiveness about what I'm going to do for a career and my general level of unhappiness being a stay-at-home dad. That was the hardest job I've ever had in my entire life. And I just know that I couldn't do it again, or at least I wasn't in a position to do it then. Maybe going forward would be a little bit different, but I was just so ill equipped and my unwillingness to reach out and ask for help because we were in Ohio, not super close to any family. And then obviously Japan, like half a world away from everybody. I had already found Mr. Money Mustache and White Coat Investor and all these financial resources. I was so gung ho on saving money and I was just so unwilling to buy the babysitter for the night. So anyways, there's two parts of every story and I just felt compelled to say that. Okay, so you asked questions and I completely forgot them, so I'm going to need you to repeat them.
Oh, no, actually, you answered all of them. So, no, that's good. Yeah, thank you for saying that because it is true. Whenever we hear stories about bad breakups and things like that, there's always two sides of everything. People aren't inherently bad. There's only a few people in the world who are inherently bad. So I really appreciate you saying that and recognizing that it takes to create a relationship and probably to end a relationship too. I'm sorry to stick on this, but you said that being a stay-at-home dad was one of the hardest jobs you had. And one of the reasons why I'm so curious about why you think that is because that is something that I may be considering at some point in my life to do, is walking away from the career I have and staying home with my child. And I don't know when that would be. So, this is how much I am not a parent, but I'm thinking of my job now and how hard it is and how awful it is. And I'm like, being a stay at home parent would be so much better. So, when you said that, I'm like, maybe I need a reality check. So, yeah, what made it hard for you?
I don't think you need a reality check. I was not ready to be a dad at the time. My ex wanted a child. We had conversations and she asked for quite a while, 2 or 3 years probably. And I would just say, I'm not ready. We have mountains of debt that we have to get out of. And it felt irresponsible to bring a child into the world at that time. And on a personal note, I mean, I felt like I was still pretty lost, that I didn't know what I wanted to do. And the inkling of the aviation thing was there. And I'd already had built up some flight hours and gotten my private license. And I really wanted to explore that and get myself into a job and into a career before we decided to have a family. And I just got broken down over the course of months and years, and I finally kind of caved in. And so I just mentally was not in a space to be the sole provider when my ex was going through her first year of residency and she was gone 14, 16 hours a day. And it was just me and my kiddo. And just being perfectly honest, I felt resentment not only to my ex, but also to my kid. And I'm like, wow, that brings about a whole different level of self hatred for feeling that way. But it's just how I felt. There were some struggles with feedings. And so for a while, for a few months, it was me driving out to the hospital multiple times during the day so that she could feed. And of course, I was already sort of at my wit's end because I tried to feed her and it was just crying and crying and crying. And there was absolutely nothing I could do. And I know she was hungry, but she just couldn't eat. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? I mean, all those reasons combined, it was just very, very difficult for me. It got a little bit better in Japan because at that point she was one. So she was kind of starting to walk around the place and she was kind of starting to talk a little bit. And that helped tremendously because now I'm like one on oneing with somebody instead of like one on zeroing. Because like a baby's just flopping around and not doing much of anything other than some cute stuff every now and then. So, in case my daughter ever happens to listen to this podcast, and I can't imagine that she would, but in case she does, I love the crap out of her and always have, but it takes a long time to be okay with the dichotomy of feelings of like, yep, I feel this way sometimes and it's awful. And sometimes you just got to leave the room for 5 minutes, even if they're really upset. And also, I cannot imagine my life without her in it. Holding those two things together is difficult. And it's just like, continues to be a practice. Although I will say she's 8 now and I love spending time with her. It's great because now she's this person I interact. She's got her own opinions and stuff and we can have conversations. And now it's really fun. But that first year and a half, incredibly difficult. Did not know what I was in for, and I certainly wasn't ready for it.
Yeah, what I've heard is that in the first year, baby wants mom. Dad's there to do the housework and mow the lawn and cook dinner, but baby wants mom, baby wants the boob. So I can see how that would be really difficult. I will say, I know you're not the only parent who feels like this. I'm in a fertility therapy group. There are two women who already have children and are trying to have more, and then the rest of us who don't have any. And I told them the other day, so we're going through all of this. It's so hard. And sometimes I get this feeling when I'm just not doing anything, but thinking about a child being here in this moment and me having to keep this little tiny human alive. And I get so scared, so scared. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I thinking? Should I do this? What is wrong with me wanting to do this? I literally think that. And I told him this, and I was like, I'm very scared to tell you guys this because I know all of you are really, really desperate to have a child, including myself. And the two moms were like, nah, that is exactly how it feels, even when you are a parent. It's terrifying, it's hard, and you're not going to love it 24/7. They were like, honestly, you probably won't even love it 50% of the time. And I was like, okay, thank God. And they were like, but it's still the best thing you'll ever do. And I was like, okay, okay, whew. Dated. You probably didn't need that validation, but definitely I've heard that from so many parents. I think I know one or two people in my whole life who are like, I love being a parent. And who knows how, like, in reality they are. So, yeah.
Feel free to validate me anytime. It's not a feeling necessarily that goes away. It does get easier, but it still comes in. And there are times where she was with me for like 2 weeks last month. And yeah, there were times where we're like, listen, kid, I'm going to need some self time. You have some self time. We'll regroup in like 30 minutes and everything will be better. But I can't handle you right now.
Self time. No, that's good. That's good. Okay. So I want to switch to your money origin story, which is what I love to call it, and talk a little bit about how you grew up with money and how you kind of learned about money from your parents. And the first question I love to start with is what's one of your earliest money memories?
Earliest money memories. I guess technically the earliest money memory is earlier you mentioned like, oh, I'm such a nerd. No, I'm a nerd. So I played and still play sometimes World of Warcraft, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with what that is. I can tell by your face that, yeah. So
Yeah, I
yes,
just on camera, by the way. Nobody can see that.
so I played it as I rolled when I was when it came out, like 15 maybe. I did not have my license, which is key to this story. And like the first expansion pack or whatever came out like a year or two after, and all my buddies were going to go get it on the night that it came out. And this was in January of 2006, I think. And roads were pretty icy. And so I was like, hey, mom and dad, can you drive me out to the Walmart or wherever so I can get this game? And they were like, no. I'm like, well, everybody else is doing it. And they're like, yeah, we don't care. We're not getting out. This is way too dangerous. And I'm like, okay, cool. You don't have to get out, but can they come and pick me up and us go to the Walmart? And they were like, nope, we're not having you get into a car with a 16-year-old when the roads are icy. And I'm like, oh, that is so frustrating. So they wouldn't let me get it then. There had been a conversation about whether or not, because of course I'm 15, I don't have a job at this point. At least me personally, I didn't. And so they had been paying for the subscription because it's like you pay like 15 bucks a month to play it or whatever. And they were like, you know what? We're going to just not be paying for it then if you're going to be this way about it. Because I was like, I had some sass to me. I was back talking quite a
Yeah, that's
bit.
what we do.
That's my first memory of like they have the power to take away this thing if they want because I have no money of my own. So I think technically that's probably my first money memory. Shortly after that, which I think is maybe a better money memory, is when I was applying for college and I was going to fill out the FAFSA form, which I don't even know what that stands for, federal aid or I don't know, something. Can't remember. Anyways,
Yeah, I have no idea what it means. I just remember it sounded weird. So I was like, FAFSA. So,
so I was filling that out, and one of the questions that was asking him like household income, and my mom was not working at that point, and I said, "Well, how much does Dad make?" And she's like, "I have no idea." And I'm like, "What do you mean? You're married to him. How do you not know how much Dad makes?" And she didn't, and he didn't share that with her, I guess. And looking back, I've always had this sense that money is not something that is to be talked about openly, particularly not in public, but even within the household, it's not super okay to talk about. So luckily, I was not ever in a position really to worry about it. I grew up very privileged, except for this one instance of this game that they threatened to not buy for me or whatever. Like anything that I wanted within reason, I got. So good and bad to that. I think as a kid, I look back very fondly at my childhood, and I had really good friends and played lots of sports, and we went on vacations, and I just had a lot of fun, and I had none of the worries that most people end up having. Like I said, just in a super privileged position, but I was also very ill equipped because of that. Coming into the real world as an adult, I hold them responsible for both of those things, good and bad.
yes, as you should. So that usually brings me to my next question. How was money talked about in your household? But it sounds like it wasn't talked about in your household. So growing up, did you have kind of a sense of where your family was on the rung of financial security? Were you like middle class, upper middle class, lower middle class, poor, super rich? Did you kind of get a sense of that even though things weren't talked about?
Very much so, yeah. We're from a very small area in Kentucky. Our town probably had 6 or 7 thousand people, maybe. So, and because of the jobs that my parents had, we were relatively well known. My dad used to put people to sleep for work. And so anytime somebody needed an epidural for giving birth, or just being put to sleep for surgery, he was one of the 2 or 3 guys in the county that would put you to sleep. He was very friendly. He's very personable. He had a good sense of where everybody was at and was friendly. And so when I would go out to places, they'd be like, "Oh, hey, you're so-and-so's son." I'm like, "Yeah." I didn't have a lot of really tight-knit friends. I only had a couple of those, but I had a lot of acquaintances. I knew a lot about everybody's family. We were very much one of the wealthier families in the area, generally because of how poor the rest of the area was. And looking back, it's kind of funny. So I had some friends in elementary school that were from very different socioeconomic backgrounds, although that was just completely non-existent to me. I had absolutely no idea. And I remember asking to spend the night at one of my friend's house one night when I was in fourth grade, maybe, or fifth grade. And I remember my parent, it took a little bit of cajoling to make my parents agree to that. And it turned to find out it's because they were kind of worried about my safety going and staying in these people's houses because they were quite poor, relatively uneducated, lived in a relatively bad area. And so looking back, it's kind of obvious how much better off we were than a lot of the other people in town. And because of our socioeconomic status and where we lived, which is like off of a golf course for at least like the later half of my childhood, we were friends with other families that lived there. So we vacationed together. And so kind of you are who you are, like, what is it? You're most like the 5 people you spend the most time with or whatever. And all the families kind of did the same thing. So we didn't interact as much in my later years with the same types of people that we did when I was growing up, because now we're in this place and everybody's making pretty good money and we're all vacationing together and stuff. I think that's probably another reason why, because neither of my parents had money growing up. They're both from pretty poor families. And so they had some success. And I think they didn't want to give their kids the impression that we were any better than anybody else. And so it made sense, at least probably in my dad's head, to not make money a conversation, because that opens up the floodgates of potentially hurting people's feelings and making it awkward with people that you just want to get along with. And so I think a lot of that is where that came from, because that's very much the way that he was raised as well. Being so poor, it was just like, okay, you don't talk about money. So now he brings that up when he's got his own family, even though it's sort of for a separate reason. They probably didn't talk about it because they just didn't have it. It was like, wasn't worth even talking about because they just couldn't afford stuff. And now it's for a different reason. Okay, we don't want to make people feel bad, which I can understand both circumstances. But ironically, it's the complete opposite 180 now. I'm guessing it's because I got so into it and I wanted to talk to somebody about it. And I also wanted to have really good ongoing relationships with my parents. And so I'm very open with everything going on in my financial life. And he has since opened up about his financial life. So I know all of his details and my mom's details as well. So this is really cool. It's like a really nice ending to the whole story. But growing up, it was very different.
That's incredible. I'm so happy that your parents are open to doing that. I still have no idea how much money my mom made during her career. We talk about money all the time and she will not tell me. She usually tells me a range. She's like, "Well, it's less than you, but it's more than this." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever." And I think it's very tied to that generation, right? I'm assuming your parents are probably in that boomer generation, and because we're around the same age, and you don't talk about money. And even today, I think we're starting to open up more about it, but it is tied so tightly to people's sense of self-worth because it's your literal worth. And how easy is it to tie your self-worth to literal monetary worth? It's just one to one, right? And so I could see how somebody who's poor doesn't want to talk about money because of that, and how somebody who's rich wouldn't want to talk about money. Could be anything, not wanting people to feel bad, but also maybe not wanting to be taken advantage of. And my mom, the way she thinks about it, she's like, it's not their business. They don't need to know how much money I make. Whereas I'm like, we make this much money on a podcast, who I don't know how many people listen to this, but enough. So I think it's interesting how it's changing. Also, when you said your dad's job was to put people to sleep, I thought you were saying your dad's job was so boring that he put people to sleep. But then you said he's like an anesthesiologist, basically. And I was like, oh. So yeah, that's where my brain went. If nobody can see this, but Sam is cracking up. Don't worry, I am funny. So, how would you say the philosophies you grew up with in your household shaped your views of money now as an adult?
I would say the fact that I didn't see my dad very often growing up, which was a testament to the hours that he worked. I mean, he was on call constantly because it was just him and one other guy mainly. And so just the nature of the job required at least one of them to be available at all times 24/7. And so him getting called out in the middle of the night was a regularity, and he'd spend lots of nights at the hospital, especially if there was somebody that was in labor and, okay, it may take 36 hours or whatever for this thing to happen, and they've got to be there all the time. So while I didn't like that as a kid because I wanted to be with dad, at some point it clicked in my brain like, oh, he's working really, really hard for us to make the money so that we can have the lifestyle that we have. And that, I think that work ethic bled over into me. And especially given my personal circumstances, I had the ability to also pursue my goals as hard as I felt like he pursued his. So I think that's, in one aspect, a good aspect of my childhood that I took with me. There were also, I think, a bad one. So I don't want to throw my mom under the bus, but I'm going to have to throw under the bus on this one. She just loves to compare things, and she's like addicted to like HGTV and watching it and seeing like, oh, this is a super nice house, and look at the renovations they're doing, and how are they doing this? They don't have any money, and why can't we have this? I see that example, which I do not want to follow. I try to also bring that into my life as well. It's not uncommon for me to fly with a captain who's been at the airline for 20 or 30 years, and they've got super fancy toys, and they're on their fourth life, and they've got 2 or 3 houses or whatever. I'm just like, okay, yeah, that's cool, man. You do you. That's great. If you want to talk about that, whatever. But I just try not to let that get to me. I just try to keep in the forefront of my brain, like the most important thing to me that I could buy is my freedom for the future. I don't need to have all these fancy toys to feel good about myself. And so I've kind of turned that negative that she has and that she still continues to have into a positive for me.
That's great that you can do that, especially when you had a parent who was like that your whole life. It's always the story, right? You either go exactly what they're doing or you go the exact opposite of what they're doing. So, and it sounds like you're doing the exact opposite.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a quick rating. Also, hit up my Patreon at patreon.com/everydayphi-podcast for ad-free and bonus content coming in 2026. I'm Megan Combs, and I'll see you next time on Everyday Phi.